Alright guys, so a little bit of weekend homework here for everybody. I want you guys to watch this video, kind of think it over this weekend, and it's something that I want you guys to implement over the next few weeks, and I think it could really improve your trading consistency. So what I'm going to talk about today, guys, is grading your setups. In order to progress as a trader, you ultimately need to find and focus on a few setups that work best for you and completely ignore everything else. You want to find a few setups, guys, that just make sense to you. You know, they excite you. You enjoy trading them. You enjoy preparing for them. Make sense to you visually. You know, you want everything to line up for your ideal setups. Everyone is made differently. Everyone sees things, thinks differently. Every trader is different from the next. What works for me may not work for you guys, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, we all have the same goal: living a great life from the market. So with that being said, guys, in order to progress, you need to find a few setups that work great for you and then completely ignore everything else. You want to become great at trading a few setups rather than being decent at trading a bunch. And as you find the setups that work for you, your job ultimately becomes to perfect those setups that eventually become your business. And you can give the other setups no attention. You know, the few setups that I personally focus on, that I personally try to improve just a little bit on every single day, every single week, you know, those trades, those setups are my business. As a full-time trader, you know, those few setups that I enjoy and focus on, that's my business. You know, that's my financial livelihood. That's how I make my income. So what I want to talk about, guys, is how we can make sure that as traders, we're focusing only on our best setups rather than kind of bouncing around from setup to setup, over trading, and getting pulled into things that weren't really lining up for us anyway. So what I want to talk about here is using a grading system for your setups. So I want you guys to identify what your best setups are. You know, what are all the elements that have to be lined up that make a trade your ideal setup? It could be the overall market, the sectors, technicals, all of those different things, but I want each of you guys to identify your absolute ideal setup and environment, and that's going to be your A+ setup. The setup that has everything lined up, whatever it might be in the overall market, the sector, other leading names, what other kind of technicals you like to see. Whatever your ideal perfect situation, perfect setup is, that's going to be an A+ setup. Now, setups that might have most of your desired elements, but not all of them, you can consider those a B+ setup. And then any setup, guys, that really only has one of your elements present, only has one thing kind of working for it, that's a C+ setup. We don't want to trade C+ setups. We don't even really want to focus on the B+ setups. And obviously, guys, when we start to overtrade, get pulled into stupid-ass trades that we really can't even explain why we took, those are the setups that we can call the big fat Fs. Not even going to discuss those. Goes without saying, no need to focus on those. You don't need to focus on the setups that have none of your best elements present. You shouldn't really focus on setups that only have one element that you need present. Ideally, guys, you want to focus on those setups that have everything lined up. The overall market, the overall sector, you know, the sector picture, whatever technicals you desire. That's your A+ setup. And that's what you guys got to focus on as a trader. You know, so for me personally, an A+ setup for me, guys, for those of you in the group, any of you who watch my videos, I love the bigger picture group moves. So for me, an A+ setup occurs when the technicals of whatever given stock I'm looking at, whatever given setup I'm watching, are lined up with the overall market, are lined up with the given sector, are lined up with all the market leading names backed by big volume. Those are big group moves, and my A+ trades come when I can identify a group move and trade whatever stock it may be at a key level of support or resistance going in the same direction of that group move. Those are the setups and the trades that have the most power behind them. In my opinion, for me, that's an A+ setup. When I get that big picture, everything lined up, and can just go at it hard. Now, a B+ setup for me, guys, is when, you know, maybe the technicals, the chart setup of whatever given stock I'm looking at, and a few of the other names in that sector are lining up, but the overall market isn't necessarily supportive. So a good example would be Boeing from yesterday. Had a nice trade in Boeing, however, the overall market wasn't looking that great. And despite the fact that Boeing was sticking to the plan, was breaking the key levels, hanging out at resistance, all those great things, the overall market wasn't necessarily super strong. So Boeing was a B plus setup because despite the fact that it had the technicals I wanted, it was breaking above a key setup, all those great things, the overall market wasn't lined up necessarily. So for me, that's a B plus setup. And then for me, a C plus trade is when the overall market, all the big leading names, and the sector itself of the given stock I'm looking at are kind of weak or not supportive of whatever direction I'm looking to take that trade. That's kind of when you're just going against the grain, guys. Your individual stock might be bouncing to the upside, but the overall market, all the leading names, and the bigger names in that sector itself are looking kind of crappy. That's a C plus setup, and that's something I want to try to avoid more. And this is the kind of thing that does require patience. Once you guys can identify what an A plus setup is for you, you got to develop the patience to pass on all those other trades that don't meet those requirements and focus all of your energy on the A plus setups. Now, you might have to pass on a lot of trades, but what you got to wrap your mind around is the fact that as a trader, your job will never be to catch every move. And in all reality, that's impossible. You don't have to catch every stock. You don't have to catch every fade, every rip. That's not your job. Your job as a trader is to find the setups that work for you, to spend every single day trying to improve and master those setups, to grow into them, begin to trade those setups and perfect them with bigger and bigger size, and to simply just take your chunk out of the markets day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year. Your job isn't to catch every move, guys. Your job is to get a piece of the action in the way that works best for you. If other stocks that are off your radar and other setups and things are taking place, don't concern yourself with that. You know what your A plus setup is. You know when you have the lowest risk, highest reward opportunity to make a great return on your money. Focus all of your energy on that. And the other thing you guys can do, which is very helpful, is trade review. After every single trade, take note of whatever grade you gave that given setup and do a brief review on, how you think you did execution-wise, the thought process, the emotions you might have felt during the trade, and anything else that you think is worthy, of recording in your trading journal. Here's a few notes, guys, I took on my Boeing breakout trade from yesterday. And these are the kinds of things I do nice and quick after every trade. So here are my notes for Boeing. Heading into today's session, felt like shit with a stomach bug, knew there was a good chance wouldn't be able to be at the desk all day. That, along with market still at critical level and the 3-day weekend, made the game plan today a simple one. Take the planned entry, exit at or above the level of resistance, and call it a day. Traded that Boeing setup with small size, small is a relative term, as my number one goal is to continue protecting all the forward progress I've made as of late. I bought the 420 strike February 22nd expiration calls early in this session on the break above the Bollinger Band. That was my planned entry, so in terms of getting into the move, I executed perfectly. Now, I would have exited for a loss had Boeing pulled back to the midpoint of the Bollinger Band. And that's okay. I accepted my position sizing, and that's a super low risk setup. The Bollinger Band was so tight, beautiful tight squeeze that I really wasn't going to have a nice, or I wasn't going to have a big loss on that one. So exit, as planned, was patient enough to let it test the 415 resistance and took profits on the nice breakout above that level. Want to continue identifying upcoming resistance and support levels as gauges of when I should trim or take off all profits. Great execution on that setup, and I love these trades where I visualize the entire execution 100 times before the market opens. So my Boeing trade, guys, there was a few notes that I took. I kind of rehashed my game plan. I took note of my execution. I took note of what I want to continue to focus on moving forward. And you'll notice that I didn't say anything about the fact that I made $500. $500 is just the payment for doing my job. $500 was my payment for waking up early, identifying that setup, executing on the game plan, and then doing that review. So these are just two things I wanted to share with you guys. So I suggest each of you, we got a long day, a long weekend ahead of us rather, take an hour or so to sit down, open up the charts, and really think about what your A+ setup is. And let's make it a goal as a team over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks or so to try our hardest to focus on nothing but those A+ setups and pass on anything else.